Dupes, dupes, dupes. Let's find some dupes, dupes, dupes. I wanna find dupes, 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 dupes. Hey guys, and welcome back. So, as you can see, we are in a different position here today because as soon as I saw the new Wet n Wild palette come out, I knew I wanted to do this style of a video. It is the Wet n Wild palette that is supposed to be a dupe for the James Charles x Morphe palette. I did a swatch comparison video before with the Blue Blood and the ColourPop palette, and you guys actually really enjoyed that, so I figured that this one would be really fun to do too because these palettes are supposed to be so incredibly similar. Here's the classic James Charles palette, and here is the brand new Wet n Wild palette. This one just arrived in the mail, so it is untouched. As you can see by all of these shadows, they just look so beautiful, ready to be dived into, whereas the James Charles palette I have been abusing a little bit. I'm gonna do some comparison swatches today to find out how similar these two palettes really are. Of course, there are a few differences between the two right off the bat. As we all kind of know, the James Charles Morphe palette is $39 and it does have 39 different eyeshadows. It is also formulated with pressed shadows and pressed pigments. So two different kinds of formulations. There's mattes, there's shimmers, there's metallics. Whereas the new Wet n Wild 40 palette actually has 40 eyeshadows inside of it, so it has one more than the James Charles palette. Just kind of eyeballing it right now, I'm not able to tell which shadow is the extra one. We will have to dive into it and kind of find out as we go along. As far as I am able to tell online, it is only pressed shadows within the 40 palette. I didn't see anything mentioning if there is pressed pigments, and this of course has matte, shimmer / metallic formulations inside of it. And I don't know if I mentioned the price, it's $19.99, so there is a $20 difference between the two palettes. They are roughly the same size. I think the James Charles Morphe palette is just slightly bigger than the Wet n Wild one. If you stack it up like so, you guys can't even see that, just like it, there we go, just like a teeny bit larger. But, you know, looking straight at it, pretty similar. When I opened it up though, I could tell that, open up. There is some shades that look very similar, but they have changed it inside of this palette, whereas the Morphe palette has it as a matte, this one has it as a shimmer, so as we go along through it, I'll definitely mention, you know, the differences between the two. And of course, couple things to mention is the layout of some of these shadows have been switched around. So when it comes to matching up the colors, I will be jumping around a little bit inside of this palette. Alrighty, but let's just go ahead and get into the swatches. I'm gonna be going based off the Morphe palette. So I'll be going row by row with this one, and I'll be trying to match up with the Wet n Wild palette. Let us begin with the first shade. By the way, I lost the name sheet to the James Charles palette, so I won't be able to mention anything, and I think the Wet n Wild palette had a name sheet as well, and I misplaced it already. Alright, so let's dive into this first matte beige shade, and let's swatch it out up here. Kind of matches my skin tone perfectly. And by the looks of it, I'm thinking that this is supposed to be the matching kind of shade for this one, because this is the lightest shade inside this palette aside from the white. Let's dive into this shade. Definitely not matching within that first shade. The first one is more of a beigey shade that kind of matches my skin tone. This one is more of a, I don't know, I'd call it a camel, but both are matte formulas. All right, let's dive into the second one in the James Charles x Morphe palette. And with that one, I think it's supposed to be matching with this one. Ooh, definitely different formulation within that one. Okay, so this one is a shimmer, whereas this one, I believe Wet n Wild, I had to double check, is called a pearl. It has a little bit more of a chunky glitter situation going on. Both very pretty, but different. All right, moving down the line, going into this one. Beautiful gold shimmer, which I think is gonna be matched with this one over here. Ooh, slight difference between the two. One's definitely more golden, this one's more bronzy. You know what? This might be the standout 40th shade. This is a very golden shade right in here. Let's put that one up against here too, because I think that might be closer. Oh no, it's not. That one's a lot more yellow gold, so very interesting. Let's keep going. Orangey shade in the James Charles palette to the orange shade within the Wet n Wild. And this is very different because, oh wow, even the color looks a whole lot more orange in the pan, but the Morphe palette is a matte, Wet n Wild is a shimmer. And it's more of a red orange, I would say. Keeping on going. Another matte in the Morphe palette. Matte orangey red. Compare that to this one. Pretty similar, definitely a little bit of a difference here. This one is a lot more red in it. This one's a little bit lighter. All right, keeping on going. We'll be here for a while if I don't keep going. Next one is a shimmer. Looks like it's gonna be matched up with this one. Okay, now those I would say are actually pretty closely matched up. They look almost spot on. So I think we found our first dupe within the palette, which is this one and that one over there. Next shade. Beautiful shimmer. I don't know, I kind of feel like I want to swatch this one again. I know I used it up here and it was more bronzy, so it didn't match up anyway. I think it was supposed to be that golden one. Oh my gosh, I totally messed up. I think this one right down here was supposed to match up with those. Let's go in, do a quick wipe. I know, I'm so sorry, I'm jumping back. All right, so jumping back to that shade, and now I want to try it with this one. I missed that one. Okay, still off. Wasn't supposed to be that one anyway, but I had to verify. Back to this shade. I think it's supposed to be matching with this one. I'm gonna re-swatch that one and try it. Oh yeah, I'd say that is pretty close. Both are of the shimmery formula. I'd say this one is a little bit more metallic-y though. Yeah, I'd say that. That is gonna have to be a wipe right there. Running out of room. Got one more shade on the first row. Let's go into that one. This is a matte brown formula. Taking the Wet n Wild one. Both matte formulas. Wet n Wild is definitely a whole lot lighter. I'm gonna stop trying to talk about every single one because I'm gonna be here for way too long if I do that. So next one in the Morphe palette with the next one in the Wet n Wild. Again, both matte formulas, slight differences. Pinky shimmer with a pinky shimmer, but slightly lighter. Although on camera, I think they look very similar. So we might call that one a dupe. Now we have a grand total of two that we could say are dupey. Third one in the second row, a matte shade to the third one in the Wet n Wild. I like it when they match up, makes things easier for me. And this one is also a matte. Again, I would say that they are very different in formula. This one is a lot more rosy than the shade up here. I'd say that one looks like more of a mauve. That's what I'd say. Fourth in the second row, shimmery shade. Do we say that this one matches up? Yeah, you could say that. This one is a different formula though. The Morphe one was a shimmery shade. This one is a matte and definitely very different. Fifth shade, the red inside of the Morphe palette, which honestly I was very impressed with this one because you cannot find a red shadow inside of a palette that is a true red. There's always hints of like burgundy and things like that, so this is a very good red. I'm wondering if Wet n Wild tried to do the same. So again, a matte. I believe that they tried to do a very rich red, but this one has a little hint of a kind of burgundy within it. I'd say the James Charles is definitely more of a red, whereas this one's kind of a mixed red, if you know what I mean. So moving on once more. Beautiful shimmery shade to a, ooh, looking like another beautiful shimmery shade. Oh, look at that. Both shimmery shades but with a slight difference because I feel like the Wet n Wild one is a shimmery shade and the Morphe one is actually a metallic. It has a little bit more of a sheen to it. But aside from that, very, very similar in the shade, I think. Let's wipe this row away. We need more room. So let's now go into the 7th shade in the 2nd row. Put that up here. It is a matte shade. Same with this palette. This is gonna be a matte also. Ooh, okay. Similar, but I would say that this one, when you look at them really close, this one has a bit more of a kind of purple note within it. See what I'm saying? Maybe hard to tell on camera, but there's a slight variation between the two. And then 8th shade now to the 8th shade. I have a feeling that these are gonna be very different. Oh, actually, again, kind of similar. They look a little bit different in the pan. This one looks a lot darker, but when you look at it, honestly pretty similar. Both matte formulas. I'd say that this one's just a little bit darker, maybe like with some black inside of it, and this one's a little bit more of a brown. Now, moving on, row number 3. We're going into this one, which I know this one's called Flashback Mary. I remember that. A matte formula. And now we're going back up to this one, which is Wet n Wild's matte white formula. Very spot on. So far, these 3 seem kind of dupey to me, if that's a word. Dupey. Now the 2nd one, I think this one was called Face or something because it was supposed to be a highlighter for the face. And I mean, big difference between this row and that row because these are huge pans. These are still small. Okay, so Face. Is that supposed to have a dupe? I don't feel like this one has a dupe within this palette. I swatched out all the shimmery golds when I was trying to compare it to that one up here. Yeah, I think this one is gonna be stand out on its own. No dupe. Because, I mean, this is completely far-fetched. And I already swatched that one. So let's move on. That one has no friend in the Wet n Wild palette. Oops, got some of that in that palette. Wow, this palette is so dirty. This is kind of like a mustard Dijon eyeshadow. That's what that reminds me of. Let's see. Does it have a matching one? I don't know. We'll swatch this one because it's 3rd within the palette. And maybe we'll swatch this one next to it. Both completely different. These are of a shimmer formula. But just so you guys can see them. Okay, moving on. Let's go into that one. And this one, I think, is gonna be that one. Oh, and side note, I didn't swatch this one because it's so different than that one, but just so you guys can see it, I'll swatch it with a little bit of space here. There's that shade. And now I'll go into this one, which I think is gonna be the matching one for that one. Yeah. Again, definitely very similar, same matte shade, just slight variations. 5th of the 3rd row. Another matte formula. Compare it to the Wet n Wild. Whoops, that one got a little powdery there. Yeah, I mean, I would say up until this point, very similar shades between them all, except from slight variations, actually, except from the white shade. That is a match right there. But the rest of the colors, I mean, very similar. Wiping away once more. So now on to the 6th shadow. Right up top there. I believe that one was like no beans or something. Into the Wet n Wild one. Both browns, both matte, just, I think the Wet n Wild is a little bit darker. Let's, oh, almost went in the Wet n Wild first. Into the black shade in the Morphe palette, or James Charles, to the black one in the Wet n Wild. Looking very spot on with that shade, I would say. Into the yellow now. We're on the 4th row, finally. And I remember this shade, it was called B. Matte yellow, and the Wet n Wild. The colors look pretty spot on. 2nd shadow. Shimmery shade to a Wet n Wild. Shimmery green. Ooh, that one I would say is pretty close too. This whole row. Oh, but this is gonna be different. Let me clean off my fingers before I forget. The blue shade here is of a shimmer formula, whereas the one in the Wet n Wild is a matte. And this is more of a light blue, that one's more of a turquoise. Both very beautiful colors though. All right, moving on to the bright blue shade, which I believe this one's a pressed pigment. I honestly forgot which ones were pressed pigment, so that's why I haven't been mentioning it. But I think that one and that one and that one are, if I'm remembering it correctly. But this is, again, a matte formula. I'm gonna compare it to this one, which I know is gonna be different because this is more of a seafoam green is what I like to call it. And this one's a total blue. Man, I got eyeshadow going everywhere on this table. So now we're going into this shade, another matte formula. And I know for a fact this one was a pressed pigment. Comparing it to the blue. Again, different right away because this one is a shimmery formula. And very different in the color, I think. And yeah, there you have it. Some similar, some not. Let's wipe this one away again. Okay, so where did I stop? I just took a mini break here. Need to give my arm a break. Purple shimmery shade. Gonna compare it to the one over here. Oh, actually, looking at it here, no, because then that one would be matched with that one. I'm looking at it here and I'm like, wait, should that one be matched with that one? But I think it's matched with that one. Kind of just want to swatch it next to it anyway, but I'm gonna swatch both of these just so we get an idea. Because I think this one is technically supposed to be matching with it. Oh yeah, it's the same kind of light purpley shade, but just want to show off that one too. Okay, yeah, just want to test that theory. It was wrong. All right, 7th shade. I call this one a magenta purple. Matte formula. To the Wet n Wild matte formula. Definitely a whole lot more vibrant in the James Charles one, but I feel like these are still within the magenta family. They just chose to do a different kind of magenta, which is a little bit fun. So not a straight copy, a different shade level. I mean, if you look up some shade names, you can find a lot of different colors that are supposed to be that shade. So I feel like that's what they try to do with this. All right, on to the, whoops, I need to wipe my fingers. Almost forgot there. On to the baby pink shade, which is the last one for the 4th row. And the Wet n Wild one, which it's gonna be totally different because that one is of a shimmery, actually kind of more metallic shade. And I'd say more rosy pink. Moving on to the last row, you guys. Beautiful, vibrant green inside of the James Charles palette. The first shade, beautiful. To the Wet n Wild. Gonna be different right off the bat because this one is a shimmery shade. This one actually looks pretty similar to the one I swatched up there, but I feel like this is more of an emerald and that's more of a forest green. So yeah. All right, the 2nd shade in the 5th row. Matte formula to the Wet n Wild one, which is a shimmery formula. And the color is also not the same. 3rd shade. Ooh, beautiful. To the 3rd shade in the Wet n Wild. Oh, look at that. Very similar, I would say, between those two shades. But I would say that the Wet n Wild has a hint of black in it, so it looks a little bit deeper. But I think the tone that they have within it is very similar to that shade. Both very beautiful. I like that shade. And let's wipe this away one more time. My arm needs a break in a minute. All right, so 4th inside the James Charles palette, which this one I am 99% positive is a pressed pigment. And it is of a matte formula. And let's compare that to the Wet n Wild palette. Oh yeah, look at that. Pretty similar, both mattes, both blue, but slight variation between the two. But what are we on? 5th one for the James Charles palette. This is a shimmery shade compared to the Wet n Wild, which is a shimmer formula as well. On to the purples. The last 3 shades. Matte formula here in the James Charles palette. Very beautiful purple. Compared to the Wet n Wild shadow, this one is a shimmery formula though, and very different. This one's a light purple, that one's a dark one. On to 7th shade. Matte formulation, lighter purple. To the Wet n Wild, another matte formulation, but this one a lot more vibrant purple, I'd say. Ooh, let me clean my fingers one last time, and then we're going into the last shadow in this palette. Or both palettes, actually. Hot pink shade, matte formulation. Look at that, very beautiful. Again, matte formulation, very pink. You know what? I would dare to say that these two are almost spot on. Maybe a slight difference if you really try to look at it, but I would say that they're pretty doopy. Oh gosh though, 79 swatches later. That definitely was not as fast as I thought it would be. End verdict with these two palettes. I have to say, you know, I love Wet n Wild, but this is the definition of, hey, can I copy your homework but just switch it up a little bit? Because the palette, I mean, it's so similar. Not every shade is a straight exact copy, but the kind of tone is the same. Like, just pointing out these guys, I mean, it's so similar. There's a slight variation when you swatch it out, and also with orange, this one's a matte, this one's a shimmer. It's like it's almost the same, but just with slight differences between them. Therefore, this palette is not an exact copy. It's not a straight dupe. There are some shades that feel like exact copies, like over here and over here and over here, that look almost the exact same, but the other shades just have such slight variations between the two. Like there's this type of seafoam green with a blue over here. So there's differences between the two, but when you look at it all together, it's just so extremely similar. As far as if you guys need to go out and purchase the Wet n Wild palette, if you have the James Charles palette, I don't think you necessarily need to, unless you are dead set on it, you want to buy it, because there is the slight differences between the two. But I feel like if you have the James Charles palette, I mean, you could stick with just this one. If you don't have this one, sure, you could go with that one too. I feel like a lot of people already have the James Charles palette though, just by how much it's sold out in the beginning there. So I feel like everybody almost has this palette. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there that don't have it, but yeah, there you have it. All of the swatches of both of these palettes for our scientific research, if you will. This was honestly really fun to do because it was surprising as we went along to seeing the differences and similarities. I had fun with today's video. That's all that matters, right? Having fun with things. But yeah, that is where I'm gonna conclude today's video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and hit that little bell button. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys!